Well, hello. Welcome to a new week. Yes, it's me, Mr. Merrick, and here I am. I am going to be your teacher for the last 5.5 weeks. Pretty crazy, huh? We've made it this far. We've made it to where we're almost done with the school year. I know it seems like it's never going to end, but it will. So here's what's going to happen. Today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through kind of what's going to happen this week. I want to remind you that what we're doing is we're building on all these building blocks that will eventually get us to a research paper. And we are at that point where we're actually going to start writing. So I kind of want to walk you through what we have and give you a chance to look at a few examples, and then also give you a chance to work, right? Because this is kind of the main idea here, is that from here to the end of this unit, which is going to be next week, it's a lot on you to work. And if I can fill you in on anything, that's why I'm available on the days of the week, the first class meeting and the second class meeting, for an hour both days to help you out. So what if you look at the agenda here, a few things I want to go over. First of all is going to be updates and perspective. I'm going to kind of give you an idea of where we're going. You'll notice that I'm not Miss Soto, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. We'll also talk a little bit about how you go from an outline to a draft, because that's really what we're going for here. And we're going to kind of get one shot at this draft this time. Normally we'd get a full draft done and then I'd give it back and ask you to fix a few things. This time your aim is to be as good as possible the first shot, so take your time with this, all right? I'll talk a little bit about these things, but ultimately here, where we're talking about work time and what the homework is, that's where we're going to I don't want to take up too much of your time because I want you to be able to focus on that, all right? So let's move on to some updates and perspective. So what you'll see here is, again, a few things that I would just want to emphasize to you. So up until last week, up until Friday, Ms. Soto was teaching these classes, and the last thing that she assigned you was the outline, all right? And the outline was to be a very full, very well thought out, driven by sentences, not just bullet points. And so since that was due last week, she's going to continue to be the person who grades your work, all right? So I know some of you have sent me outlines asking for my feedback. For now, I'm just going to say, turn that stuff into Miss Soto. And if you're wondering how to do that, obviously you can submit them on Google Classroom. That is the method that you're going to need to submit things by. And if you feel like you needed to unsubmit it and then submit it again, at that point I want you to email it to Miss Soto. Again, her address is asoto30@illinois.edu. All right. Since that was due last week, starting on Monday, today, if there is no outline that you've turned in, it will result in your first missing. A missing does equal a 0 until it is turned in. So some of you are going to start seeing the effects of maybe a dropped grade. Hopefully that is not the case because you've taken the time to do the work and that you've turned that in. But at this point, we have to put some fire underneath some of you, and hopefully this does it. Again, we're not asking for perfection. So if you're a perfectionist and that's keeping you back, what we want to do is we want to see you attempt this, and to attempt it to the best of your ability. So don't be held back by feeling like it has to be perfect. What I really like you to do is just drive forward. And if you have any questions, again, come and ask so that we can fix anything that might be an issue. All right. The third thing just is to remember to honor me as I try to honor you. All right. So just like Miss Soto was doing, right? She's giving you feedback on your work. Moving forward, I know that this is crazy times, right? But honoring each other means trying to do things as close to the schedules as possible. So when I say that something is due on a certain day by a certain time, please try to meet that deadline. I know that you might be sleeping in, or you might be, your schedule might be wonky, but I really want you to try to honor me so that I'm not up feeling the stress of having to answer an email on a Sunday that you sent to me on a Saturday. I know you have families. I have families too. I have a family too. I don't have multiple families, just one. But, I need to spend time with them as well, just like your families probably need to spend some time with you on some different times, at some different periods, all right? That brings us to, yes, I'm Mr. Merrick again, still, and Miss Soto will be missed. She was great. I'm glad that some of you really created a relationship with her and found her to be a good teacher. But again, this might be a difficult transition back to me. But again, if you have any issues, you want to talk through anything, please, please, please ask me. Miss Soto will be around a little bit. I'll invite her on occasionally. But ultimately, right, she is graduating from college, and so we're going to let her enjoy her rest and relaxation after all that work. And so that brings us to the last point. Where have we been? Well, it's official. We've been here remotely learning for 8 weeks. On Tuesday, it will be 8 weeks. But what that means is that we have a short period of time left to the end of the year. We have basically about 5.5 weeks to the end. So there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Maybe not for stay-at-home orders, but there's a light at the end of the tunnel for the school year. So I want you to, again, do what you can to make sure that you are engaged as much as possible during this time. Again, I'm not asking for perfection, but I am asking for your engagement and participation. All right? So 5.5 weeks left. Let's get it done, right? All right, so moving on. Let's talk a little bit about also, last week, right? So last week you had an outline. Your outline was probably much more detailed than this because Miss Soto asked for a detailed outline that was in full sentences and whatnot, all right? So if you ever get a grade back from her and you're wondering, why did I get a certain grade, or how would I have graded this if I was the teacher and I was grading myself? So I'm going to put this here. I can't decide where to put my camera, but what I want you to do here really quickly is I want you to look at your outline, and I want you to do a little quick self-evaluation. And if you get a grade back and you're wondering kind of like, hey, I thought I did better, or ooh, I thought I did worse. This is a chance for you to kind of look at what that grade means, but also for you to think about, okay, if I were to do this again, what would I need to do a little bit differently? If you are resubmitting something for Miss Soto and for a regrade, you want to move it in the upward direction. So some things you're looking for is whether or not you have all the sections of your paper, whether or not you have levels of detail. So here's my main idea, here's the evidence, here's the evidence, and then here's my explanation of that. Does your outline guide the reader logically through what your research showed you? And then ultimately, can you actually use this outline to start drafting your paper? This right here, this is what we're doing this week. You are now taking your outline and you are writing your paper. All right? We're not writing the whole thing at the first part or at the same time, but we are going to write a large chunk of it this week. All right? So what I'd like you to do is I want you to take some time and I want you to pause this video, all right, after I've given you these instructions. What you'll see is in the assignment today, you have a document titled Sample Research Paragraph. And what I want you to do is I want you to, and I know this is going to feel awkward, but I want you to read that example out loud. All right? The reason we ask you to read this out loud is we're going to ask you to do this with your final paper as well. You will notice the way things sound if you hear yourself speak it. You will notice where perhaps some grammar mistakes are. When you hear yourself, make a mistake, like, oops, I know that there's supposed to be a comma there because I hear it in my voice. I know that, oops, I just repeated 3 words at the same time and, or I'm sounding repetitive. If you start to hear repetitive sounds when you're reading your own paper, you know that you're being repetitive and you're going to need to change something, all right? But ultimately what I want you to do is I want you to pay attention to how your evidence is being used, or how the evidence in this paragraph is being used. Notice how the quotes are incorporated into the sentences. And then also I want you to notice how the sources are cited. Because ultimately when you go to your writing of your paper, you need to do these same things. You can't just drop in a quote without giving it context. You can't just drop in a quote without giving the source. That's called plagiarism. All right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop. I am going to ask that you actually stop this video here and that you do that work really quickly. Okay? Hopefully you had a chance to pause the video, you had a chance to read through that. Here's another example of just kind of how things are incorporated, right? You'll see here in parentheses, hopefully you saw this, in parentheses you saw that the author's last name is put there when their evidence is included. Sometimes there isn't an author, and so maybe you have to write the title of the article, right? If it came from somebody whose name you put in the actual sentence, right? Then your information is added a little bit differently. So either way, you have to cite your sources, right? And there's multiple ways to do that. So look back at that example, look at all the different ways you can incorporate sources into your paragraphs, and start experimenting with it. And hopefully it'll lay out really nicely. You'll be happy with what you come up with, all right? And that brings us to our last thing, your homework, all right? So here's what your homework is. Your homework is to open up the assigned work that I put into the assignment for this week, and use your outline to write your 3 or more body paragraphs. All right, so depending on what your outline says, don't include the introduction, don't include the conclusion yet, just take all your body paragraphs and start writing them as well as possible. All right. When is this due? This is due on Friday by 3 p.m. I know this is a little different. Many of you have gotten used to like Friday at midnight or something like that. But Friday at 3 p.m. allows me to spend some time on Friday for the rest of that day looking at your work and getting feedback ready for you so that you can use that feedback next week. All right. So I do ask, and I put that note down here, please honor this so that I can give you feedback before the final research paper is due, which is going to be on the 22nd. That is Friday next week. I do also want to remind you that plagiarism is not okay. Don't go to some website and try to find the easy way out. Plagiarism's not okay and will result in an automatic failing grade of 50%. So you want to make sure that you don't do that. How do you stop yourself from plagiarizing? Cite your sources. So you got that quote, where did it come from? Who wrote that? That way I can see what is somebody else's ideas, but I can also see what are your ideas. So in a little bit, I'm going to be live on camera, ready for you if you have any questions. And also just to kind of do a check-in. So I need everybody to find time to come on camera with me. And if you're not here during the designated time, please find time during academic lab to stop by. Thank you very much. I will see you soon. And you can start your work now if you feel like you know what you're doing. Bye.